Okay, so this is going to be a very short video just covering header files really quick. So let's say I just made this sweet function. It's doing exactly what I want it to. So this one is going to replace all A's uh, in a string with C's. So it does. And let's say I have a whole ton of these, or I have too much in my main program right now. This is getting a little bit cluttered for me. So let's say I want to move some of my functions that I'm using over to a header file. Basically, what that means is I'm going to make a new file. I'm going to move my code into the header file, and then I can link these two pieces of code together so that the main function can still call functions from that other file. So in order to do that, I'm just going to make a new C file. I can name it header.h. H is for header files. Normally, for header files, you want to do what's called a header guard, which is saying if def header h define header and if, and then you can put your code in here. And all this does is saying, this is think of this as a kind of new language for the C preprocessor. This is saying if header, I want to say if ndef, if header is not defined, define header, and then the if statement ends right there. So what that means is if header is defined, so right there, then none of this will actually be compiled. And that just stops your header file from being included more than one time, because then you'll run into problems. So I put up my header guard here. I've made my header file. Now I can just take my code, copy paste it in here. And then I need to link it somehow. So I need to make sure that this code right here can use these functions. And to do that, I include it. And then instead of using the less than greater than signs, I'm going to use double quotes, and I can do header.h, just like that. So when I use double quotes, it's going to be searching in the source file, in that source folder, for a file named header.h. And because it's in the same file as the main.c, it'll find it. So we see when I go to compile this, it works just fine. No errors there. And then I can, let me go ahead and run that. Oops. Oh, it's called main. So if I do AABBAA, there we go. So we can see that that function still works, even though it's in the other file. So I want to highlight this working. So if I were to include this 2 times, and I can go ahead and compile it, compile is just fine. But if I did not have these header guards, so let's say I removed them and tried to compile it, we say I get errors now. Redefinition of replace A. So that's saying I defined this function 2 times. And it makes sense if we consider what include is actually doing, what this is actually going to do. So when I say include, what that means is it's going to grab whatever's here and just paste it right on that line. So all this code is just going to be pasted right there. And then similarly, when I call include again, all this code is going to be pasted right there again. So I end up having the same code pasted 2 times into my source file. So that means I end up with 2 functions that are both called replace A, and that's no good. So by having the header guards, we say if header isn't defined right here, then carry on and paste this function in. But if it is already defined, then just skip all this and nothing happens. Just as a side note, I usually call these the same name as the file. So I know this is a header file, but they're not all going to be named header file, because if I had 2 headers, then these need to be unique for every header that I have. So usually I just like to call these as the same name as the actual file. Okay, so now that we know that the include statement is just going to paste the code right here, it shouldn't be too hard to see why if I move this define statement down here, I'll also get an error. Notice how in my header, I use buffer size 2 times. So if I try to compile that, we see undeclared buffer size. So buffer size is undeclared in the header file on line 5. So that's right there. And this makes perfect sense because buffer size is defined on line 7. And if I'm taking all this code and pasting it right there, buffer size is not defined yet. So that's a little bit more about what the include statement does, as well as some tricks on how to get header files working. And this will be required in Lab 7, and it's not always required. Again, and here's a scenario where I only had one function. It's really not a big deal. And header files can get really complicated. We're just going to use them for really simple code management in this class, and probably pretty rarely because we're not going to be writing programs that are that big that require serious code management. All right, that's it.